All right, I'm going to introduce you to someone who I was introduced to via friend Harry Lemonade during COVID lockdown. Thank you to Nasser Alazzawi for taking the time to sit with us for this interview. How are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. I'm in what was sunny Cyprus. I gather it's morning where you are in Florida, and it's just the sun's just gone down here. So we've had a lot of storms, a lot of rain down here compared to last winter. So not that I want to talk about the weather too much, but it's been quite topical. So I've been indoors more than you would expect for Cyprus, and I can't wait for the spring to kick in. Really, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, the weather's not too great here, but indoors is not too bad. It's safe. It's cool. It's
Good,
dry, so can't complain.
good.
So let's get started. How were you first introduced to the dance music scene?
I was really quite young. I've got a friend. I've got one friend who's got a lot to answer for, and some of my friends in the UK will know who I mean. And we call him Rossi. And Rossi at school when we were sort of 15, 16, we used to share music with each other and find dance music and your Paul Oakenfold stuff in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then he discovered the clubbing scene, the Gate Crasher, the God's Kitchen, the Promise and Shindig and things like that. And he kind of like gave us the idea to all go, and he sort of led the way, and we just went for it. And I discovered, and it was in the era where trance was really big in the UK certainly, and for a lot of it, it was all about trance. So when I went out for trance events, what I wasn't expecting was to see progressive house and progressive trance in the warm-ups. I was going to see, if I went to see Tiesto or Armin van Buuren, I was getting quite my ears would pick up the progressive at the beginning, and I really sort of identified with it and sort of had to ask people what's this kind of music, because I don't have any. And in the time of Napster and Audio Galaxy and all of this stuff, where we didn't know that, I think even then it wasn't even illegal to do what we were doing, but we didn't know it was unethical or illegal to file share. We just kind of, we had 56K modems with the noise down the telephone line. And it took us, if we were to download one track, it would take like half an hour or 45 minutes. And then
Right.
if we were to download a DJ Tiesto set, it would be like 3-4 hours of downloading what wasn't a very high quality recording back then. It was just, something that we enjoyed. So, but yeah, Rossi has a lot to answer for with this, and what really happened after that was there was about 5 or 6 years where I would go clubbing, and I would keep going to the trance events and being drawn into. If I was at a festival, there would be tents for house music or tents for progressive house or techno. And within about a year or two of me going clubbing, I realised that I actually love what then was the Sasha sound, the John Digweed sound. And there was some techno that I liked, and there was a lot of techno that I didn't like. It was really sort of like anxious, but there was some chunky, vibrant, what would you call, they kind
Hypnotic.
well, and there was some of it was melodic, but some of it was like industrial, chunky, tribal. I love the sound
Gotcha.
of authentic drums and all of that sort of thing. And at the same time, there was tribal house or tribal progressive house, whatever they called it. At the time, I didn't really know because I wasn't a DJ. And after about 5 years, 6 years of going to the events as a very young, I was 16 to 19 when I did most of my clubbing. And sort of like what really happened was I realized that staying up till 5 a.m. or sometimes later wasn't suitable for me whatsoever. And if anything, I had friends who realized at the same time, and they'd get away from the clubbing scene and sort of, grew out of it, which kind of always happens. A lot of it was, in the mid-20s, a lot of people peel away from the scene. And I sort of peaked too soon, almost virtually left the scene, but I would still listen to music in the car And then everything kind of went into minimal techno and electro and tech house, and tech house took over for like 10 years. And then I kind of lost my interest in it, but it came back when the same guy who I went to school with sold me his DJ equipment for really a very low price, because he couldn't be bothered with going through the sales process on the marketplace. It just said, you know, I know you like music, have these, and he gave me an Allen and Heath and some CDJ 1000s for £1,000, which is about $1,200. And that's what, you know, that was only in 2013. That was a long time later. So you know, that's why I'm here. I'm here today because of Rossi. Like he's got a lot to answer for, and you know, I sort of don't give him enough credit for it. Really, I think I need to tell more people. But he caused all of that to happen, and then the rest, the DJing chapter was sort of after. But the dance music that I went out for was trance, and then I discovered house and progressive really through the warm-ups, and also through a night called Shindig, which is still a big night today in Newcastle, because they would get Sander Kleinenberg and names like Steve Lawler and people like that, which back then had a very unique house sound. You know, Lexicon Avenue were a huge part of that, and Forensic Records, and that sound I always loved, but I always felt like I never got enough of it, because frankly I didn't have the money, and to go out every week like a lot of people did. I was really young, and you know, I guess I still have more brain cells for it for not staying out all those times. But it you know, the reality is I sort of do wish that I'd been out more back then, and perhaps even started DJing sooner. But that's where it all started.
Wow, fantastic! I'm always fascinated by people's story of how they got first introduced. It's just refreshing to hear similarities and obviously the differences, but yeah, it's always fun to learn how people get introduced.
Yeah.
So who were your musical influences that shaped the music that you're into now?
A lot of it was, look, it's sort of a bit of a number of DJs. Strangely enough, I'm not someone who listens to a lot of DJs. I sort of like get a focus on one, and then a small number of others, and I'd often listen to the same stuff. Especially if I was working, I'd put headphones in and listen to something I'd heard a lot.
Right.
So it's sort of centralized around the same people, and you know, Sander Kleinenberg was a big one in the early to mid 2000s. He had a Sander Kleinenberg Essential Mix 2003. I must have heard that 100 times or more.
Yeah.
And then there was a Chris Scott, Lexicon Avenue, did a CD, I think, with Scott Bradford and Mark Armstrong, and it was called The Adventures of Shindig Volume 1. And there was never a Volume 2. I always wished there was, but I think that CD that I had in the car got played that many times. The CD just sort of like burned out. It like stopped working, even though I hadn't scratched it. And I never know what really happened with that. I don't know what the technical term was, but it was used. And you know, a lot of it was that. I like some techno. Like there was some old techno from Umek and Valentino Canziani in the early to mid 2000s. They're different now, but they had a style that was in fashion for about 4 to 5 years, and I kept doing this actually. I caught the end of the fashion, and then they changed it, and I didn't like what they changed it into, but I loved that. Sure. Tribal. There's something that just makes you want to dance. It's not always about melody and all of that, a long journey. It's about the situation now. Like, you know, it's a very immediate dopamine kind of response that you get.
Very underground.
And the one thing the common thing that ran through all of it was something I was thinking about recently. The reason that I loved what that was, it was neither cheesy or trying too hard, and it was sort of like a lot of it was unassuming, but you had to sometimes almost like think to find what it's trying to say or what it's trying to mean. And sometimes it would be I would understand where a sound had come from, and other times it was like a discovery. I'd really love to work out where the sound came from, especially with the tribal sound that's sometimes still there with organic house now. It's like a mishmash of these DJs. A lot of it was also a local DJ called Richard Tulip, and he was in Newcastle, but he was one of the co-promoters of Promise. And Richard would be very capable of doing a banging trance set, but he could do 2 hours warming up for a trance DJ with progressive house and progressive trance. And I always used to ask people when I was 16, 17, what's this kind of music? And someone who'd been going clubbing for 5 years would be like, this is progressive house. And most people sort of, they come and they like it, but they don't come for it. They come for the trance in the numbers, and then they discover progressive house. So Richard Tulip, who I've in recent years become real friends with, back then he was a DJ up in the gods, and I didn't know him. But he's a very sort of, he's got a lot to answer for in the northeast of England, and he's a very sort of, just an honest, sort of humble kind of guy, but he's also very passionate about music, and he's got a very successful business, but he always comes back to music as a passion. And even now, like 20 years later, he's still, every once in a while, he puts on an event and hundreds come, and it's people our age in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, who still show up for him. But he formed a lot of it as well.
Nice, very nice. So, what's your viewpoint on how music has changed and developed in recent years?
It's mixed because, when I first got to know Richard Tulip, which was only 3 years ago or something, I talked to him about this, and I said, I've got styles that I like, and often I feel like I want to explore them deeper, and by this point, the style has gone out of fashion. And in the early 2000s, I felt like every sort of 3, 4, 5 years, things would change, and sometimes the fashion would change in 2 years or a year and a half. I seem to remember, I think electro, a certain part of electro was only in fashion for like 2 years, and then it switched to minimal techno in Europe. I don't know where you are in America. I don't know if that was the same actually, but he said sometimes he noticed, as a working DJ, he noticed that in 6 months a sound could change in twice in a year within a genre. You'd have a lot of producers making a sound that fitted a set, and you could go 6 months later and those same producers are making different sounds, and some of them have moved on to techno, some of them have moved on into a different genre sometimes, and that's what they do because they don't want to get bored of what they're doing, I guess. And we, as a fan, I never wanted them to move on. I was like, no, please keep doing what works, because
right.
And often, like I say, with the downloading of music, sometimes I would download a set from 6 months ago and be like, wow, that's amazing. And one of them was, I'm still fuming at myself for this, but I went to Creamfields Festival in 2003, and there was an absolute, a huge menu of every DJ you would want to see. But the problem was a lot of them were on at the same time. And sure. I didn't know who, obviously I'd heard of Sasha, but I wasn't into Sasha at that point. And I walked into Hernan Cataneo tent and walked in, and I was like, wow, this vibe is amazing. And I walked in on my own, and I was with about 30 people off a bus that had traveled the country to the festival. And I sort of went to get them, and I was so messy that I forgot to even pull them back into the tent. I just got lost in what was then Paul Van Dyk or somebody else, like that. And all of this was new to me. Like Paul Van Dyk I'd never seen before, and just tents with like 8,000 people, with just a sea of heads and all of that. I get goosebumps thinking about those moments. And but I never pulled anybody back to the Hernan Cataneo tent, and I actually forgot that I did it. And then someone mentioned the name like a year later. And again, we got broadband at this point, so I got like 10 of the Hernan Cataneo sets in about 20 minutes in a zip file with my friend. And I was like, I love that sound. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
and it was still faster than it is now. But you know, that was one of the big takeaways. Actually, was the progressive genre then was a lot faster. But the music, it felt to me that when tech house took over, in particular, progressive just disappeared. And I don't think it's true. I think it shrank. I think Dave Seaman and Papa and Anthony Papa and a lot of other DJs were still doing it, but I didn't feel like it was present in the scene in where I lived. So it dipped, you know, and tech house took over. And at the same time as tech house taking over, you had this influx of people who learned Ableton and Logic, and I don't know how it really happened, but it felt like technology got, you know, more people got into the technology. It was cheaper to buy it, or some people would copy it, you know, illegally download it or whatever, and just make tracks. And I can't produce good music, but when I've tried on Ableton, I've made actually a half decent tech house loop. And I've realized actually this isn't that hard. And I can understand why tech house became massive, because it was so easy at a point of entry to learn tech house and make tech house. And I think there's people who make, you know, far better quality tech house, but there was a lot of the same sound for years. And then I heard, I think it was John 00 Fleming. It might have been, I might have this wrong. I think it was John 00 Fleming and or John Digweed and a few other people went to Beatport, because there was an EDM genre that took over at the same time as tech house. And EDM there was just so much more money in EDM. You know, loads of the DJs that came in 2010 to 2018 in particular, and obviously the rise of Avicii and people like that, they could make music that sold millions. And it wasn't like a lot of the DJs, producers that sold probably low thousands, 20,000, 50,000 copies would be amazing. I'm making the numbers up. I don't really know. But you know, these guys were it. They were all over the radio with EDM sometimes as well. And when that happened, EDM, I never know how this happened, because it just doesn't make sense. But EDM was labeled progressive house on Beatport. I don't know if you know this. I don't know how far back you go. But when I started to learn to DJ, it was 2013, and I was playing, I would say, good tech house. But you know, good is subjective, isn't it? But I didn't know you could get progressive house. I mean, I couldn't find any. Every time I went to progressive house, it was this probably 135, 140 BPM EDM. It was Steve Aoki. It was, you know, sometimes I don't even remember the names, but they're obvious EDM names. And I heard something like John Digweed or John 00 Fleming. It wasn't Dave Seaman, because I asked Dave and he said it wasn't me. But some of the people, I think they actually went to Beatport and said, look, we've been DJing 20, 30 years, whatever. This is what the progressive house sound is. And yet you're labeling this as progressive house. And can you see the difference?
Right.
And they got the at the same time as progressive house that we like started coming back, they got the label changed on Beatport from progressive house to, I think they labeled them big room, right? So if we were EDM DJs, we would now buy in the big room category.
Gotcha.
So that then allowed, you know, the Guy J's, the Dave Seamans, I guess the Anthony Papas, whoever was still making music in 2016 for real progressive house, it allowed that to come through, because actually we could find the music off the genre rather than looking at a name, which is a different way of searching. And and then I noticed, as I noticed this, I started I started moving my music to progressive house again and going back to what I always loved, and that's, you know, in terms of where the music's going, you know, that was like the first half of it. But where the music's going, it seems to be splitting off into Beatport's become really good at sort of recategorizing or subcategorizing what would have always been known as like deep house music or progressive house music. So they've got like organic house, they've got melodic house, they've got melodic, I think they might have melodic techno now, I'm not sure. but they're doing it because the sheer volume of quality music that's coming out makes it really hard for the good DJs to be seen away from, good producers to be noticed, away from the swathes of just bog standard stuff. And organic house now, I've been paying attention to organic house the last 6-9 months in particular, and melodic house, and it feels like I can't speak for everybody else. I don't know really where this is coming from, but I'm less drawn to the faster music now. I'm more, I'm anything above 124 BPM feels like, how do I put it? It's a hard one to put into it, but I feel like certain genres, like the beat, the sound to be able to breathe by leaving enough of a gap between the beats. If you have the beat too fast after each other, you can't hear as well what's happening between the beat. And because I'm not a producer, I don't, and I guess like a proper producer, I don't know the correct term for this, but someone else like Chris Scott, Lexicon Avenue, or Anthony Papper will totally be able to explain this better. But if you squeeze the beats together, it feels like the bit in between is rushing when it's trying to tell its story. So one of my colleagues at Progress On, Alan Ruddock, once surprised me by, like, we were playing at 123 BPM, and for one track he slowed it down. But it didn't sound like he'd slowed it down. I just saw him do it, and he slowed it down by like 2 or 3 BPM. And I said, can you do that? Because I always thought that once you're going, faster and faster in increments, you're supposed to do it so that people can't always notice. But I've never thought of going back, slower. And he got me to believe that you can go slower 2 or 3 years ago. And I feel like the future isn't always in going fast. I think there's a place for it. We all of us at Progress On come from a trance background originally, but some of us were DJs in the early 2000s where I wasn't, and they have, we all have, I guess, we all have a nostalgia with the faster music, because trance was for us for years. Trance was a huge part of what we were. But one of the things I noticed that I'm doing is I'm not afraid to slow down and go like 120 BPM or 118. I've even played, some beach sets in Cyprus, beach bars, and I've done down tempo at like 109 BPM or slower. And that's really slow to me, but it doesn't. Some of it with the organic house at 112, 115 BPM, it doesn't sound slow. The way it's produced, and I don't know how they do it, but it doesn't sound like it's that slow. It still carries a great energy. Whereas if I slowed down some of my progressive house from 122 BPM down to 110 or 114, it would obviously sound slowed down. And I think some music can do that and some can't. But what I am noticing with the music, and I think this might, this could just be my music taste, because I don't see all the music, is I'm noticing, Lee Burridge, All Day I Dream label, and labels that work around that kind of genre, and then the organic house genres, they're becoming more fashionable. And I think they're becoming more fashionable. I don't mean that they're replacing anything that I'm noticing, but they're up there with the brands that we all know. And there's a huge, it feels like the thing that attracts people is that they don't have to be 18 years old and discovering music to come in and like it, because this music is sort of like more all-inclusive. It helps people come and forget about whatever's going on, and they could be 35-year-old, they could be 50-year-old, and we actually have this at Progress On, people coming back out because we do daytime parties, and the whole music scene. I always ask, why did it have to be that it goes through the night? Because it doesn't suit me. It's staying up till 5 a.m. I can do it, but next week I'm wishing I sort of hadn't. And it takes me like days to get just over the lack of sleep, let alone anything else. And so these beautiful sort of melodic house and organic house sounds, I feel like they lend themselves better to the day parties anyway. And beach bars and anything that, especially if it's sunny, you know, it's amazing. But it's not all about banging, having really like heavy music, which any of us can do. But you know, there's like a maturity that comes with the sound, and I think I feel like that's coming through more. From my, you know, from where I'm sitting, it feels like that's coming through more. But it could just be that I'm only looking there more often than I'm looking, you know, at the other genres, because I know melodic techno has boomed in the last few years, and
right.
It's not really, most of that I would never play, but I can see people filling stages with it, even in Cyprus. You know, it's so easy to think that something's happening because you're only looking there. So, you know, that's my sort of hopefully balanced take on what's happening from my perspective.
Right. Interesting. That's a good perspective.
Mm.
So, what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of our industry in your journey within it?
Probably for the reason that I got into it, that underground dance music was the first time when I stood there and tried to realize, why do I love this? You know, despite appearances, I'm not very outgoing and not that chatty. You know, I've had a couple of cups of coffee to get this interview, you know, going. But you know, what I've got is a very busy brain, and sometimes I want it to quieten down, and I struggle with that. So when I go to a dance music event and there's sound engulfing me because there's umpteen bass bins and speakers all over the place, and they're not just in front of me, but they're also behind me. You know, you can't escape the sound. On top of that, there's usually a visual element that's just striking when you look at it, and you can kind of get lost in it. And I love that. Even if it wasn't the most visually striking thing ever, you can get people to that point of letting go of everything just with music, if as long as the sound system's good. Or people's headphones are good. And I love giving that to people, because I know that in the real world there's a lot of things happen in people's lives that none of us know about, and it's not our business. But the point is, I want them to just put all of that to one side and you know, just enjoy now, like the moment. And the most rewarding part, that's part of it. But the other one is there's sometimes moments where when you're DJing, I came from a style of learning to DJ that worked for my brain to get into DJing, but it wasn't the way that I DJ now. And I think if there was one thing that was very common when I started, and actually still happened with the live stream sometimes, is that I would prepare the sets. Like I'd plan the whole set. So the music sounded great, but I wasn't choosing based on what's happening now to the next moment and reading the crowd. You know, I was planning the sets, and the most rewarding part of DJing, I think, comes when you don't plan the sets. And I've only done a handful of those because I'm not like a long-term experienced DJ in the public eye. And I was so nervous, you know. A lot of people talk about this imposter syndrome. They think that they're going to get found out, or they don't have enough confidence in themselves, and I usually identify with that person. But the most fun I've had, you know, DJing has been, sometimes it's been when it's been a full room, but I've had moments where I'm DJing and there's just a smaller amount of people because I'm on earlier in the day or earlier in the night, but I've not planned the music and we're connecting over the music. Like I can feel that they're feeling it, but it wasn't scripted, it wasn't planned. It was just that I had this track on in my headphones, and I knew that what I wanted to say next was this, and they connected with it, you know. And that's, even if it's a small crowd, it's great if it's big, but if it's a small crowd as well, it still is there. And that is the most rewarding part, is the connection with people. And it's in a way that you can't type it to someone, you can't say it to someone, you can just look at them and know that they are you're both in that moment and you understand it on the same level. You know, that's the best way I think I can explain it. That's the most rewarding part of it. You know, along with the setting aside your troubles and just kind of being in the moment. You know, those I think that's the best way I can explain it. And maybe someone else can explain it better than I can, but that's how I feel.
No, I 100% agree with your statement for sure. It's pretty much how I feel as well. So you restarted hosting events recently. How did progress on begin?
So one of the weird frustrations I had when I learned to DJ was we had a deaf neighbour, and we had what we call a semi-detached house. So it was one building with two houses in it. And I don't know if in America, I see a lot of people actually have a house and a massive bit of land, and then over there's another house. So that, you know, people in Britain like to cram properties together. But we were in one of these semi-detached houses, and every now and then I would throw a party. Because I could kind of crank the volume up, and the deaf neighbour, who we knew, said, you know, I said to him, if we feel vibration through the house or anything, if I'm turning it up too loud, text me and let me know. And he said, son, it will take a bomb going off for me to notice anything. He said, just knock yourself out, have your fun. He says, I'll tell you if I feel anything, but I don't believe I will. And he never did. And but what I noticed was I started getting back in touch with people who were in 2014 or 13, who I used to go clubbing with, and some of them would come out and have a little gathering at our house. But people's priorities had changed, and where I'd sort of peaked too soon and left the music scene and then came back, in that period they'd kept clubbing and then burned out of it and got jobs, got children, grew up, got careers, owned businesses. And I'd sort of like started a business a few years earlier as a letting agency, which are like I think you call them realtors, but where you rent a house out for a landlord rather than sell it. And you know, it felt a bit like, am I too old to be doing this? I was like 29, 30 years old. Am I too old to be starting this now? And in the end, I thought, do you know what? Obviously, when people come to the house, to the party, they enjoy themselves, but we do it in the day. You know, we kick things off at 4 p.m. and finish at midnight. We don't kick it off at 10 and finish at 5. So every few months, I would text everybody. I would say, this is a strange way to start the event. I would text everybody with a link to a survey and say, in 2 months' time, which weekends are you free? Which Saturdays do you have free? And the survey would say to me, right, most of the people can come on this Saturday or this Saturday. And I would choose it because I knew that if I'd said to someone today, do you want to come to our house on Saturday? They'd be like, I've got plans, because adults have plans usually the week ahead, for weeks ahead, you know, quite often. And I noticed that. I don't know why I picked up on that, but I noticed that I was never going to get everybody out for a gathering if I said I'm having it this weekend coming. So it was literally 6 or 8 weeks ahead of time, all these parties. And what really happened was 5 or 10 people came to the first one. Then it became 15 and 20 and 25 and stayed at that number for a while. And then it became, at the last one in 2019, we had a house party in a small house, relatively small house, and it had 45 people in the house.
Oh, wow.
But it got to the point as well where there was about 5 or 6 of them where we didn't know who they were, and we didn't know who they were with. Like they'd heard there was a party and they just turned up to our house. And there was possibly an answer to it where I would have been fine, but me and Sophie were kind of looking at each other, and 2 years earlier we'd sort of renovated the house, and we were looking at each other going, are we taking the mick out? Are we taking the mick out of our house? Are we, you know, going to ruin the house if we keep doing this? And there was little dings in the paintwork, and people would knock things over, and little things would break. And what happened was, this is a photograph actually of the last one. This is just the kitchen. There was people, I don't know how much you can see that, but that's the kitchen in
Oh,
that.
wow.
And all of those people in that room, every one of them was at Promise and Shindig in the early to mid 2000s. I got them back out, and they'd all heard about, you know, that I've been doing these parties. And the funny thing about this one, the funny thing about this one is Sophie got into full host mode, and people would turn up sometimes at 8 o'clock at night, but we'd already been going for 5 hours. And they were like, "Wow, it smells like a you know, it smells like Christmas or something." And she was cooking people sausages and this, that, and the other in the kitchen whilst we were all raving. And we got a friend of mine had left the music scene, and he gave me some massive speakers that had no business in a house, but because the neighbour was deaf, we could go hell for leather, so we just went for it. And we had a number of these, and then at that one where there was 45 people, unfortunately the deaf neighbour moved out and he sold the house, right? And then new neighbours moved in, and in 2019 it was a shame, because Richard Tulip from Promise, who's someone we all look up to locally, Richard Tulip came to the last 2 of the parties, and he threw some amazing sets. He brought all his classic vinyl out, he brought progressive house, he brought trance out and techno, and it was like, for me to have Richard playing in our house was just a huge sort of an honor, and it was like a privilege. So that it was attracting more people, and I thought, oh no, like if the neighbours moved on, we can't keep doing the parties. And I didn't want to go public. I resisted it for a long time, for months and months, and then eventually I thought, I can't. If I do nothing, the momentum will go, and it'll fizzle out. Because momentum is a powerful thing. If something's building and getting better, and then you drop it for too long, people will just. It's a funny one. I believe in that. I believe in the law of momentum. Keep going. And so people kept texting me and asking me, when's the next one? When's the next one? And I was like, I haven't got any plans. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to go to a club. I'm not going to fill a club. I see a lot of people come back from Ibiza or Germany or somewhere else where they've had an inspirational music experience, and they come back to Newcastle, where I'm from, and they launch a night and 20 people turn up, and they've spent $3,000 on bookings, but they don't know how to promote them. And I don't know how to promote big events. I still don't know how to promote big events, but I also know that I don't know it, so I don't try and fill a 2,000 capacity club. So anyway, the temptation was drawn to me when somebody pointed out there was a pub which had an outdoor terrace on the roof, and we had to pay for the hire of the venue. We had to pay for the bouncers, the security, two people, one at one side and one at the front door, to be there. We didn't charge any money to come to the event, because we never used to charge money. And we just said, look, it's a bunch of local DJs. It's me, Alan Ruddick, Phil Littledyke, Sophie, and some trance DJs actually came as well. And I made the flyers in a very amateur fashion and stuck it on Facebook, and 180 people came to the first event. And
wow.
I couldn't believe it, because I was expecting, like, if we had 45, there might be 50, 60, 70 people. But we also were blessed twice with like some of the hottest days, some gorgeous days, beautiful, beautiful weather to play progressive house and all of that in. Especially when you're in England, you're flicking a coin as to what the weather's going to do. Even when the weatherman says it's going to be sunny, on the day it could be cloudy or windy or rain. They're never usually that right. But twice we got the outdoor parties, and people really came for them, and it got us attention. And local, I had messages from people who I look up to saying, I've heard what you're doing, keep it up, even though they'd never been, they just heard about it. And they said they'll come one day, and now I've got some of them DJing for us. And what happened was we had 2 summer events that we went indoors, because as soon as you get past September in the UK, it's obviously going to be cold. And we went indoors, and there's like a venue that everybody knows as a bar, music bar, but it has what they call a secret disco at the back. So you go to a bookshelf, and you push the bookshelf, and you go into this whole other secret room. But it isn't very big, so like it would look busy if there was 70 or 80 people in there, and I think its capacity was 120. And twice we filled it right to capacity, and then we went a third time. Yeah, I think more than twice actually we filled it to capacity. But then on March the 14th, 2020, we'd already had weeks of hearing about COVID, and that was like our 5th event or 6th event. But we kept hearing that this word lockdown was being talked about. Now, simultaneously to that, Sophie and I were about to move from Newcastle in the UK to Cyprus. We'd sold our house to move, and we booked the Stupid Experts. I don't know if you've heard of the Stupid Experts. We booked Fuenka, who play on UV label a lot. And then Richard Tulip was playing for us a few times, and it was always just such a good vibe, and the same people would always come back. So it was like our house, just a bit bigger. And yeah, like in the end, we thought we were going to have to cancel the March 2020 event because they kept saying we're going to go into this lockdown thing. There was all these people were scared on Facebook about the army showing up, and like as if something from a film was going to happen, you know, and I guess in the end, but what happened was we had our party on March the 14th, our last one for a long time, and then lockdown happened like the next few days, I think it was, you know, it got announced that the venues are all going to shut. And in the northeast of England, there wasn't very many COVID cases, so we were fortunate that we knew we weren't putting that many people at risk, because there was like low hundreds in the whole region, you know, of COVID. So we kept it on, did the party. It was like, I think it was one of the best ones we'd done. And then the country shut down, and then we flew to Cyprus, and you know, all of that was kind of like the main start of Progress On, you know, the outdoor events, the indoor events, and then it was just reaching a level of quality where we had like better lighting and different things, and then it stopped. And you know, everything after that predominantly was the live streams. But the what we learned in events was massive. You know, it really pains me to see, and I've seen this dozens of times, where you get promoters who don't want to do a small event because they think of themselves as a big event, and they don't fill the place. It just looks and feels empty. You know, there's nothing.
Sure.
And what's more is the venue. If you do it in a venue, the owner of the venue won't have you back because they won't have made any money on the bar, and they've had to pay all of the staff and the security and all the rest of it, when they could have had a busy night in there. And we've always gone small, a little bit bigger, but still small, and a little bit bigger, but still small, because we know the progressive house scene isn't very big. Where we are, it isn't very big, and it's got the potential to be, but it takes years of building it up. And you know, so we've some people think that they say to us, you know, you should go and hire this big club, and it's like, well, maybe one day, but that could be 18 months, 2 or 3 years down the line, and I've got no problem with that, you know, because I want a vibe in the room, and I want the people to feel like they're amongst people and not in an empty room. So we've always succeeded with that. We've had a really good run with it. And alongside it, I've kind of, from the very first Progress On, even with like one of these old, I took one of these old webcams, not a proper camera, but I took a webcam and hooked it up to a live stream setup when I didn't know what I was doing, and I just stuck it behind a DJ and stuck it on Facebook, and things like that really helped people hear about Progress On, because people were sharing it, you know, and that kind of thing. And that's how it all started. It was just a bit of passion on the music, and actually having the right team was a huge part of it, because Alan has skills that I don't have, I have skills that Alan doesn't have. Sophie has skills that I don't have in relation to the events, especially like on the day. And Phil has skills that I don't have, and it's all kind of vice versa. And some people try to do the whole thing on their own, or they think they've got a team, but actually they own it and they don't share it, and they try to carry it themselves basically, and that usually doesn't work because you can't do everything in an event. So having the right team has really helped with that, and I feel really blessed that that's been the case. But yeah, that's how the house party was how Progress On started, and I never thought I would go public. I really didn't. I really resisted it for a long time actually, because I thought it was just too out there.
So did the lockdown, did it give you time to reassess and regroup for developing Progress On as you come out of the other side of this?
Well, what really happened with lockdown, because lockdown coincided with, as a team, we were discovering how's this going to work, where Nasser and Sophie are in Cyprus now, they're not in Newcastle, but we intended on flying back for the events.
Sure.
Now, really what happened was I noticed that what I had been interested in, obviously in 2019, I was doing these streams with this webcam from the events, and Facebook would always kick you off after half an hour or 1 hour. So it was just little videos to get the thing out there, but that was as far as my streaming capability ever was. It wasn't good quality. I wouldn't watch it now. You can find them if you go look, if you know where to look. But in lockdown, in the run up to lockdown and lockdown, some of my friends were getting really good at live streaming, and I didn't really know how they got the camera to look better or the sound to sound better. And I didn't know about Twitch then. I didn't know about YouTube very much. Mixcloud wasn't doing the live streaming then. And but what I noticed was there was a lot of us were trying to get onto Facebook Live, doing 45 minutes or whatever, and getting kicked off. And none of us had a strategy or a plan. It was just, look, I want to play the music for the people who love it, and I want to at least try and connect with people that way online, because I can't party with them. I mean, we were banned from going to each other's houses, and there were even cases of people's neighbours telling the police if someone had gone round, and
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it
That's
was a strange thing. When we sold our house in April 2020, we became homeless because our flight to Cyprus got cancelled because of COVID. And our own friend had a holiday rental house, which he would put on Airbnb and Booking.com. And he wasn't allowed to let the place out, because obviously it's inviting people to travel long distance to stay in a region, in a place they're not from. It's a holiday rental, not a rental. And he said to us, look, you're homeless. Why don't you just pay us what you can? Maybe pay us what your mortgage would have been in your bills, right? And you can stay for as long as you need. And in the end, it was 6 weeks that we stayed with him. And we're very grateful to him for that, because it really saved us. But we became homeless, really. And I can't remember where I was going with that now. What was the question?
Oh, like what, how did you progress your time through lockdown? I mean,
Yeah, a lot of it. So,
did you make best of your time? Yeah.
And the oh gosh, I'm gonna have to cut this bit out because I don't know what I was saying. I was really.
We were talking about live streaming and how you bettered yourself and got more acclimated.
So when we were in the house, it didn't have very good broadband, but at that point I had so much time on my hands. I learned how to do sort of live streaming with different software and different cameras and things like that, and make it look okay. We were sort of like, we thought when lockdown started, we thought this will be over with by July. We thought this will be gone by August or whatever. This will be 3 or 4 months of the pandemic, and it will. We always told each other it will burn itself out. It wasn't. It was sort of like we really believed it, And you know, how long can you lock a country down for? You know, now when we flew to Cyprus, eventually, you know, the broadband here was better, but the weather here was better. So when I noticed everybody doing live streams, what I was doing was I got really lucky, and I met some people who owned a beach bar and you know, a small venue. But the key thing was, in the pandemic, they were outdoors, right? Because the weather it's always over 30. What do you call 30 degrees? It was probably not over 90 or 100 degrees Fahrenheit in America. It was hot, and so I was allowed to play outdoors. But a key part of this was you weren't allowed to have groups of people close together outside. They had to be sat down.
Sure.
So I was playing on beach bars, and I also managed to do a few live streams from the beach bars. And to me at the time, like, the best part of the DJing was actually, because everybody had to sit down, the best part of the DJing was that a lot of my friends joined the live stream, and I knew they were there. But
Yeah.
you know, I couldn't jump on the microphone and say hi. I couldn't really be
No.
to them very much because I'd look like I wasn't on the job.
Sure.
But it was lovely to know that my friends, who I intended on going back and being with regularly in the UK, were with me at the beach. And you know, by October 2020, the beach gigs calmed down because the weather starts changing into November. And I then went from having like maybe a monthly live stream from my house, from a pool, to doing them weekly. And this coincided with me getting something called Beatport Link. And Beatport Link, instead of me buying tracks and sticking them on a USB stick, for those who don't know,
Right.
you would have your laptop working with your DJ equipment, and you would have pre-prepared playlists held on Beatport. But when you press to play a track or cue it up in your headphones, it would take a second or two, but it would have downloaded the track from Beatport, and as soon as you finished playing, it would give it back to Beatport. It was never in your computer. And that, because it was cost effective, I went through, instead of like finding 80 or 100 tracks a month or more, I went through 2,500 tracks in no time. That I selected, as in I liked them. You know, to get that many tracks, I must have heard 5,000, 10,000 tracks. I don't know, but I was spending so much time in lockdown with my computer and the internet connection and my headphones, finding music, and it really helped hone in on what my sound was. And then my sound developed from being in Cyprus, because obviously you can't see now out there, but in Cyprus, one of the things with Cyprus is the sunsets are always beautiful. And I've got family in Nashville, Tennessee, and the sunsets there do the same thing as here. It's a different color to Britain, to the United Kingdom. And I guess it might do the same where you are. You take it for granted when you live here, but you know, I managed to do the live streams where I point the camera at me and the sunset would happen behind me as I was playing music. And that vibe was very much what I was playing at the beach bar. And I would get into melodic house and organic house more. And I never really used to play that in the UK, because in the UK, we're mostly indoors clubbing. It's usually late clubbing, and I bring a bit more energy and a bit more drive. But this move to Cyprus helped me really mature the sound that I can play in those situations where it's obviously not right to be banging the driving drums and, you know, and high energy stuff. And you know, it's actually lockdown that I've got to thank for the way my music's gone, along with moving to Cyprus, because it's diversified what I do, but people still know my sound. Like, if you walk into a club now and I'm playing and you've heard me play a few times, you'll know that that's my sound. And I like it when people have told me this before. You know, now that my sound's matured, they could go in somewhere with a blindfold on and it could be any DJ playing, and if it was me, they would know it was me. And I don't think that used to happen before. I used to kind of play through a range of genres more, and I still will do that, but it's very much there's a way that I play, and you know, lockdown. It's funny. I was saying to Sophie, I miss the days where I would do live streams every week, and I want to restart them. But lockdown caused a lot of good within my musical capability. The one regret I've got actually is that I didn't spend loads of time learning to make music, because that would have been the time that I could have given to learning Ableton and Logic a bit better. That, you know what I mean? But it, you know, I obviously wasn't attracted to doing it yet. I don't know why there's been a hesitancy there. But you know, it's all affected everything, and the live streams were a big lifeline, you know, because it was great that everybody else was enjoying themselves on it, which was the point. But actually having the purpose when I arrived in Cyprus and I didn't have a job here yet, and then Britain would come out of a lockdown and we would go in one, and we would go in a really harsh lockdown where we had to text the police to leave the house to get permission, you know. Also,
oh wow.
to walk the dogs, we had to text the police to get permission to walk the dogs. You know, all of that really got me into this insular mode. But when I was on the live stream, and I knew you were there and Harry was there and other people who were friends from the UK, most of them were from the UK, and some people in Cyprus started coming on. You can't rehearse how it feels when you're doing the live stream. You know this, right? When you're practicing at home and no one's listening, you can't rehearse the feeling until you're actually doing it when people are there, and you feel,
Indeed.
you know that they're enjoying it because they're telling you that they're, you know, what they're liking, and just bringing everyone together for an hour and a half, 2 hours or longer. You know, it's not the same as clubbing, but it's very amazing that the technology has been there this time to do that, because if this was 20 years ago, we couldn't do it. You know, we wouldn't have.
Absolutely. It's the next best thing, almost, you could say.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, because my brain's just gone off on lots of tangents.
No, it does.
To say about this topic, but you know, I think you know where I'm coming from with it.
Yeah, I do. Which kind of leads me to my next question. I mean, so for DJs that are now getting into the scene and are beginning their career and their journey, what advice do you have for people like that?
What advice do I have for people coming into the scene now?
Yeah, and learning to DJ, beginning their journey as a DJ, establishing a career as a DJ. If
okay.
That's what they.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you this from an angle which frustrates me, because I see people who I would regard as better DJs than I am coming through. And if I'm not the kind of person who listens to everybody's sets. I just can't. People send me them all the time, and there's too much. If you ask me now, will you listen to my set? I want to get some feedback on it. I'll try. But people often, what I don't like is where people just dump a set in your inbox.
Sure.
You know? And I've been this guy. A lot of the things I'm going to complain about now, I've been this guy. Okay, so like I'm saying this to my old self as much as all the other people coming through. Look, one of the main things everybody's got to learn, and I don't like to admit this, you've got to learn social media. You've got to go out of your way to learn, how does social media work? Go and ask someone who's done well, what are they doing? Or if you want to go on their profiles and dissect what they've done, like what time have they done things and how have they done it? And what about the graphics and how have they typed something and what have they not done? You know, what am I doing that they've not done because they're getting more traction? The clues are all out there. A lot of it is, I think we're past the point where if you're a good DJ, that's enough. That's a huge thing. If you're a good DJ but you're not good at social media, this is not going to work for you. And I guess there's a caveat to that. I know some people who are legitimately happy being bedroom DJs and having it as a hobby for an hour or two away from the family, right? They don't want to play in front of hundreds of people or dozens of people. They don't even want to, they don't want what I want. And what I want isn't necessarily to play in front of thousands of people. It's just to have that connection with enough people.
Sure.
But the thing I'm noticing with some DJs is they there's a few sayings that I've known for a while through mentors. And one of them is, if you do the same thing and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity.
Sure.
So if you do something that worked a little bit and then stopped getting results, but you're doing it week after week or month after month and nobody else is really finding you and all of that, then it's time to change what you're doing and improve it. And don't be afraid to ask somebody who you respect in your genre what they're doing, because the clues are there. It's not actually hard to dissect it. One of the things that I think isn't talked about enough is you need to get some kind of, there's two sides to this. Get some good graphic design or learn how to do it yourself if you can't pay someone, but also don't hide behind the brand. Don't put all your stuff out there with words and there's no face. We're creatures of a certain nature, humans, and we like to connect with a real person. We connect with brands for different reasons, but when you're new, it's really hard to become like a brand who's known before they know who's behind it. I feel like this might make sense. I'm hoping this is making sense.
It does.
I know DJs who put their stuff out there and I don't know what they look like, right? I've never seen them looking like they're enjoying themselves. Nobody's taken a photograph of them DJing, but they're like, why isn't nobody listening to my music? And it sounds really stupid because music is music and people are people. They're not the same thing. But to me, music is about connecting people, right? So I hope I'm coming across with what I'm trying to say is DJs need to get better with their graphic design to a degree, I think, but then don't hide behind the graphics. Because I see a lot of poor quality graphics and wording out there that obviously looks like it's been put together by someone whose skill is more in the music field than it is in the design field. But you know, to be taken seriously, if you're wanting to be taken seriously, you need to sort this bit out. You know, if you know someone who's got a DSLR camera, like a proper full frame camera, not just a phone, but a camera.
Sure.
Go and ask them to do you a favor and either let you borrow the camera if you want to learn how to use it, or get them to take some shots of you just to mess around. Get them to take some shots of you DJing, because if they give you 5 or 10 photographs of you DJing, you know, you can use them over time. And I've seen some people get these photos from people like that, and they've posted all 10 photographs on social media straight away. And I'm like, no, you give a bit one day, and then the next
right.
thing, you know, let's spread it out. Use it as content. You always need content for social media, and you know, it really just all ties into social media. Have a think about, what do you engage in the most? You engage in, you know, like. And there's a guy who's big in progressive house in really popular in the Northeast called Christoph. And Christoph works with Eric Prydz now. He's got a brand, but you often see him in the photographs of what he's doing. So if he says he's going to play somewhere, it's a photograph of him or his head, you know, and that's just a huge clue. There's more to it than that, but that is a long way over the line of what I see aspiring DJs not doing. The other thing is learning how to do, when you're doing posts, learn how to do videos of either yourself talking, because that helps people connect with you who don't know you yet.
Sure.
But also, if you're producing new music, I see a lot of good producers, and I think they're getting better now, but I still see it where a lot of good producers will post on social media, and social media has this problem with it that Facebook's job is to keep people on Facebook, right? Instagram is owned by Facebook and it has the same challenge. It wants to keep people on there because every 10 seconds of scrolling, you get an advertisement. And that advertisement is the only revenue stream pretty much of those platforms. And that's why they're worth billions, because they know who to advertise to, and they inject the adverts in between the feed. So what can you do? What can you do to help people stay on Facebook? You can tell Facebook that you're a good content creator by posting something that gets a lot of likes, a lot of comments. And you can also do things that other people aren't doing as much, which is such as post a video of your track. Now, obviously audio is audio, but you can do something where you put the audio on top of a video that could be you or your brand or something, you know, that doesn't have to be very complicated, but it isn't very hard to go and learn how to put an audio over a video. And Facebook in recent years, and Instagram now as well, really prioritize video over photos. I suffer from a problem with progress on that I know other people do as well, DJs do as well, where if you post an image which has text about dates and times and brands and buy now, download now, or something like that, Facebook knows that's an advert, so it down throttles it, right? And the reason it down throttles it is they know that if you press boost and pay them $10 or $20, it'll show it to everybody who needs to see it.
Right.
But most of us don't want to pay that money, and there are ways to organically grow your brand without paying that money. You just have to learn it. And I can't really go through because we'll be on for hours, and I don't know all the answers anyway. But what I'm trying to say is go and find what book can you read, what blog can you read about social media Facebook algorithm 2021 or Facebook algorithm 2022, and how to get seen more on Instagram. And you'll soon start to notice that there's all these blogs and different things are saying the same thing. You need to give people value, you know, something that they want. They don't want to see flyers all the time, you know, posters and all of that. Just do it a little bit. But whenever I post a flyer now for Progress On, I have to boost it because nobody's going to see. You know, it'll get 20 likes if I'm lucky, you know, because it knows that I've got however many followers, but it only shows it to 10% of them or 5% of them. And if enough of them click on it within 30 minutes, it will show it to another 30%, you know. But if nobody clicks on it or two people click on it, then most of them will never know the post was there. It's just learning how all this works. That's the key thing I want to get across, is learn how social media works, because it isn't hard when you know it. And I still know there's a lot that I don't know, but I feel like I know more than the average now from looking at it. And it just pains me to see people who deserve more recognition and connection get frustrated with it. I saw a post yesterday about it, somebody having a real rant who is a good producer, and he was sick to death with social media. And I said to him, you know, you've got to acknowledge that it's don't wish it was easier, wish you were better. You know, go and learn it. You know,
spend the time.
Because I think he deserves the recognition. He deserves people finding out about him. But I had to have the kind of harsher, you know, chat with him and say, you know, I could complain about everything, but I get much further if I learn how to fix it, you know, than whinge about it. Like, what's the point?
Right.
You know, so yeah, that's some of my biggest tips on the music side. It's the, you know, I think through practice, an obvious thing for me to say is, look, if you've got a gig coming up or a party or whatever, practicing 3 times a week for a couple of weeks, at least in the run up, you need to practice at least 3 times a week. If I've gone up to a gig unprepared, I can really tell when I've made little mistakes here and there on my set. And it's not that everybody else really cares about the mistakes, but your posture changes about yourself as you make the mistakes.
Absolutely.
And you get in your own head about it, and you start thinking, oh, you know, and then they notice that you're not having as good a time. And when you're not having as good a time,
they're not having a good time.
Energy transfer can happen on the dance floor from you having not best time. So yeah, that's some of my advice. I think I've got more. I just, if those things were learned alone, the social media piece, you know, is a huge piece of it. And I don't like to admit that, but it is. It really is now. You know,
in this day and age, those are very good points and very true. And some I've learned, and I've learned actually from you on some of the points. So it's definitely beneficial for sure. Take the time. All right. So one last question. What other events do you have in the pipeline for Progress On?
Well, so for Progress On, given that we've had a lot of local DJs and some up and coming headliners, we've got 2 events coming up that are really exciting for us. One of the next one is on the 9th of April at the place with the bookcase, the Secret Disco at Colonel Porter's Emporium in Newcastle. And Scott Bradford from Shindig is playing, which is huge for us. He's actually he's somebody that people always come out to see, but he says he's retired, and we keep pulling him out to he's not. I wouldn't say he's of retirement age. He's just not as prolific as he was, because he used to do events every week for years. So we've got Scott Bradford on the 9th of April, which is a daytime party. And then the big news we've got actually is on the 21st of May, Anthony Papa is flying in from Australia to play for us at a different club. So we're actually growing into a bigger club for this. And the tickets are on a website where if you go on progresson.co.uk, it looks like progression but without the I. So progresson.co.uk. There's a list that gives you the 2 tickets. You can get the Scott Bradford event, and the underneath that you can get the Anthony Papa one. What we always try and do is keep the costs down so that people can afford to come, because we're not in this for the money. We've never been in it for the money. But the events they're not that far away now. I mean, it's February now, but it'll be 2 seconds before it's these 2 events. So most of them. Sorry, the Scott Bradford one is about 3/4 of the way to selling out. Anthony Papa event has just gone on sale and is already halfway through the 2nd phase of the tickets out of the 3 phases. So anybody who's in the UK who wants to see Anthony Papa again, or Scott Bradford from Shindig and Lexicon Avenue, by all means, we'd love to see you there. It's a friendly crowd. Most of us are over the age of 30. A lot of us in our 40s and 50s, but we're getting a younger crowd coming and discovering us now as well. And it doesn't matter, male, female, young, old, everybody's safe, and we enjoy it. So I'd love to see people there, and that's what we've got planned.
Wow, I wish I could be there.
Yeah,
sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is, and it's quite a privilege to do it, because I like I said at the beginning, I didn't think we would go public even, and it was never the plan to go into the public domain. And what's been nice, aside from the moments as a DJ, is just being able to give that to people. And for some people it's rekindling something that they've put down for years, like I did. Other people never stop partying, and I don't know where they get the energy from. I want some of that energy. But the people who come out and support us, it's the reason why we do it. It's become more of a thing about them than us just wanting to play some music to some friends, which was what it was in my kitchen originally. So we're looking forward to it. It's really exciting, and I've got a lot to thank Phil and Alan and Sophie for as well, because it isn't just me that does this. It's very much a team effort, and it wouldn't be where it is today without them. So I'm very grateful to them as well, and I'm sorry they can't be here with us and on the chat. But thank you for having me on anyway. I really appreciate it, and I think I wish you luck with your channel as well. It's been nice to see it developing with the interview with Lexicon Avenue and Bean and other people coming through. I saw my friend Gavy's view was on, and Gav has been to Progress On, like he played for Progress On at the beginning, and he came back recently when I came back at Christmas, and I'd seen Gav for the first time in 2 years or something at that point. So it was good. He's a lovely guy, and
Oh yeah.
keep doing the interviews. It's really nice to see. It's nice to see people and not just brands, like I say on Facebook. I think it's important to get to the heart of the people as well.
Agree. Well, thank you again for your time and sitting with us and getting to know you a little bit more, getting to know more about Progress On. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
All right, take care, Mark. Bye for now.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.